trip that was to touch on the richest and poorest parts of the Orient. It all started in dynamic Singapore, one of Asia's economic success stories. This tiny republic has made the most of its strategic position on the sea lanes of southern Asia. The Princess Royal's first port of call was down at the waterfront for a tour of the harbour. Singapore has turned itself into the world's busiest port in pure tonnage terms, handling over 100 new vessels a day. This English princess was shown the pride of Asian shipping, a container terminal claimed to be the most efficient anywhere. A colonial backwater converted into a commercial powerhouse in a single generation. The new mass rapid transit system is the latest symbol of Singapore's progress. Princess Anne, the first foreign dignitary to ride the rails on this £1.5 billion project. This multiracial society enjoys a rising prosperity unequaled in mainland Asia. Their quest for excellence is the crusading slogan of one man. Lee Kuan Yew has been Prime Minister for 28 years, the paternalistic founding father of modern Singapore. A good friend of the royal family, but very much an Asian leader. At the Polo Club, a leftover of Empire days, Singapore's riding for the disabled by having their annual gymkhana. Children's welfare and horse riding are two of the princess's keenest interests. So it was a chance to relax after the businesslike start to the tour as she watched races that not only provide these children with entertainment, but vital exercise too. The princess seemed genuinely charmed by the enthusiasm and the courage of these disadvantaged youngsters, some of them riding to music better than they can walk. She'll no doubt long remember the efforts of 10-year-old Julian Wee, a young man determined to keep a date with the princess and help present the bouquet despite all his disabilities. A stately musical welcome at the Astana Palace. The former home of British governors is now the official residence of President Wee Kim Wee, who hosted a banquet in Princess Anne's honour. A very formal occasion to end the first stage of her tour. From sophisticated Singapore, she travelled up the Malay Peninsula to Bangkok, the capital of Thailand. A frantic, bustling, bawdy city. The crunch point for the cultures of West and East. The strains of traditional Tai Chi exercises now mingle with the shuffling steps of young Thai joggers as this rapidly developing nation limbers up for a new day. A modern country that still reveres its monarchy. So it was a classic royal welcome that awaited Princess Anne, the youngest daughter of the King of Thailand, Princess Chulalongkorn, gliding out across the red carpet to greet Britain's Princess Royal. It had been her invitation when the two met in London last year that had brought Princess Anne to Thailand. A ceremonial umbrella shaded the daughters of two great royal houses as they renewed their friendship, surrounded by the military men who controlled Thailand's politics. At Chitlada Palace, the princess curtsied to King Bhumibol Adulyadej, Rama the Ninth of the Chakri dynasty and Queen Surikit. His 60th birthday is being marked by Visit Thailand year. It's an unashamed marketing campaign aimed at boosting Thailand's already thriving tourist trade. Mainly Western travellers discovering the East. Though many come here seeking something rather less seemly than the grace of old Siam. Bangkok has gained itself a reputation as the sex capital of the world. 70% of its tourists are men, drawn by the easygoing charms of the endless strip of girly bars. Amid the naughty neon of Bangkok's nightlife, Rama IX, whose ancestor provided the courtly role model for the king and I, looks down, no doubt, disapprovingly. He'd prefer Bangkok to be known as the Venice of the East, a city of temples and teeming waterways. Much of Bangkok is close to the waterline and close to the poverty line too. The railway slum is a typical shanty town of squatters living in stilt houses over a stagnant swamp. This is where the working part of Princess Anne's tour really began. The president of Save the Children Fund had come to see how her charity was helping to improve the lot of Thailand's poor. A quarter of Bangkok's 7 million people live in slums, largely unnoticed and uncared for. The princess's visit had brought them more attention than they'd ever had before. They watched wide-eyed from beneath their wooden shacks as the princess crossed the new boardwalk, which the authorities had built especially for her arrival. The enchanting little girls who danced to traditional welcome were the product of the slum's first school, built this year with Save the Children Fund money. It provides a basic education and healthcare rarely available to poor Thais. The gifts were simple hand towels, but received with all due royal respect. For one girl still clutching her national flag, it would be just a faint memory. For the rest, it was back to lunch. The meal is free, the education costs around 6p a day, though no child is turned away. A polite, well-presented slum compared with most. Under the canopy of corrugated iron that marks out Bangkok's slums, a problem that surpasses poverty. Like countless thousands of Thais, Lek and Barn are drug addicts, hooked on heroin, the deadly harvest grown in the nearby Golden Triangle. Lek, a coolie in Bangkok's docks, has been taking heroin for 15 years. It's cheap and easy to get. Like Barn, his habit costs around £1.50 a day. But this could be their last fix. In Klong Toe, the community is fighting back. Here they've created pioneering drug-free zones, inspired by Kru Prateep, the woman known as the angel of the slums. She has persuaded community leaders to kick out heroin dealers and establish rehabilitation centers to help wean addicts back to normal life. In a year, drug activity has been halved. Sawadi, the Thai greeting, welcomed Princess Anne to a very special school and more casualties of Bangkok's slum life. A loving hug from Antili and Adullah. Like all the children here, they're severely handicapped. Most abandoned by parents too poor or too ill-educated to cope. Gay was rescued from a gang of professional Bangkok beggars. As Princess Anne saw, most of the 300 children at the Pakred home are surrounded by loving, caring people for the first time in their young lives. The crippling disease of polio, though almost eradicated in the West, is still commonplace in the East. Panya Machan, paralyzed by palsy, cannot speak, but he still managed to communicate his pleasure at meeting the princess. Sithong was making coconut cakes for the royal guest, no simple task for a girl born with no limbs. But what the princess saw was the only school for handicapped children in a country with a population equal to Britain's. The faces of farewell were hard to forget. On Thailand's eastern border, the Mekong River has been the escape route for an endless stream of refugees fleeing from conflict in Indochina. 10 miles from the Laos border stands Ban Napo refugee camp. It was built as a short-term holding center soon after Laos fell to the communists. 10 years on, the Lao longhouses look sadly permanent. The camp is home to 20,000 Laos longing for freedom. They waited patiently for the princess, but then they're used to waiting here. Some have done nothing else for a decade. Their Thai guards can't allow them out until another country agrees to take them. A generation of children born in transit. The princess and her flying media circus must have seemed a strange intrusion in this marooned, monotonous place. Princess Anne, fast becoming a dab hand at the ethnic greeting, saw how aid organizations like Save the Children have raised the standard of medical care and education. 2-year-old Suchai has pneumonia. Disease is a frequent problem in this stagnant society. The princess noticed how lifeless the little patient seemed.
Are they usually as quiet as this? Are they very quiet? Is that normal?
Ironically, they probably get better treatment here in the little wooden camp hospital than most local Thais outside the wire. But despite the modern medical care available, many Laos still have greater faith in the quaint methods of their traditional tribal healers. Though as the princess moved on to the dental clinic, she discovered there's no substitute for good old-fashioned tooth pulling. Eight-year-old Vong Thong did her best to look brave in the face of royalty. Princess Anne's next stop was to be Laos itself, the country from which these people had escaped, only to find themselves stranded in a town the world had largely forgotten. On the far bank of the misty Mekong River, morning unfolds in the forbidden land of Laos, a dawn patrol of fishermen, border guards and Buddhist monks. This is communist Indochina, where the disembodied voice of authority sends its comrades off to work with a blare of propaganda. A country battered and broken by 30 years of war, yet still retaining a crumbling trace of long-left French colonialism. The breakfast bread is pure Parisian. In the capital, Vientiane, the black market provides another taste of Western decadence, almost forgotten in a landlocked country that's been locked away from the outside world for a dozen years. They're the champagnes from Russia. The United States dropped more bombs on Laos during the Vietnam campaign than on the whole of Europe in World War II. The monument ensures Laos won't forget. Into this isolated place stepped Princess Anne, the first member of British royalty ever to visit Laos, greeted by leaders of the Pathet Lao government who seized power from their own monarchy 12 years ago. Since then, few Westerners have been allowed a glimpse of this strange society in hiding, where secretive socialism is tempered by strict Buddhism. At Siampon Temple, Princess Anne came face to face with the culture that's held these people together through royalist and communist times. She was accorded the highest blessing of the Buddhist monks, the tying on of cotton charms, to keep away evil spirits and bring her family good fortune. She received a whole wristful of luck and a sip of coconut milk to soothe the soul. Once the ritual was over, Noi, the venerable monk, couldn't wait to show the princess his pride and joy. A collection of bullet-riddled trucks left behind by retreating American troops after Vietnam. Noi told the princess he hoped to get this old Chevrolet working again one day, but Laos was rather short of spares. His country depends almost totally these days on foreign aid. The gargling greeting from Sok Palawan School was meant as no affront. The children were just brushing up their newfound knowledge of dental care. Princess Anne beamed back understandingly. Most had never owned their own toothbrush before. Though Laos is one of the world's poorest countries, the government have made health and education priorities. At this school, there was no excuse not to smile. The old King's Palace in Vientiane is now the official residence of the Lao People's Democratic Republic. President Phumi Wongwitchit doesn't get much practice at entertaining royalty, but the princess and the old Pathet Lao revolutionaries seem to get on well enough.
I think from their point of view it was obviously slightly strange. They wouldn't have known which sort of category I come under. I think they coped very well, actually, in spite of their fears. I think Laos is particularly noticeable. I mean, it's not only is it landlocked, but it's been a sort of tramping ground for armies going from one place to another, and yet, in some respects, they're adequately developed. I mean, their literacy rate is probably higher than some European countries.
Laos sees itself as a newborn nation, teaching its children peace instead of war. Yet the little birds of peace still play on a roundabout made of model Soviet MiG fighters emblazoned with the star of Vietnam. In a nearby street, the sight of a truckload of Vietnamese troops had our highly sensitive media minders in a panic. We were told to film only the finer side of Laos. The controlling presence of 40,000 Vietnamese soldiers apparently doesn't officially exist. Certainly not for the first Western cameras allowed in here for 12 years. Down in Vientiane Market, there could be no denying another little cameo of life in Laos today. These women out for a morning shopping were the wives of Soviet advisors based in Laos. They were buying the latest denim fashions smuggled in from Thailand. Their shy husbands paying for them in US dollars. Another sensitive side of Laos we weren't supposed to see. From one society shrouded in secrecy, the princess flew on through Indochina to another closed country, Burma, and its capital, Rangoon, the city of pagodas. The striking spire of the Shwedagon Pagoda, a symbol of Burma's breathtaking beauty. Its great golden stupa radiates out over old Rangoon, a temple topped with 5,000 diamonds and reputedly covered in more gold than is held in the vaults of the Bank of England. In the cool of the morning, Princess Anne browsed through this glittering monument to Buddhism. It's one of the greatest shrines in all Asia, built to house the Buddha's relics. The barefoot princess respectfully observed the house rules and absorbed the fabulous architecture. In return, she was granted a rare privilege. Strike the Mahaganda bell 3 times with a clean heart, the saying goes, and your wishes will be fulfilled. It's one of Burma's contradictions that while its temples still gleam with priceless gold, so much of the country itself has fallen into decay, its economy in ruins. A country kept isolated from the rest of the world for a quarter of a century by a government seeking the perfect way to socialism, but perhaps succeeding only in reducing Burma to one of the poorest countries on earth. For all its raucous street life, Rangoon is the capital city of a country in a time warp, where contact with the outside world has been discouraged by its doctrinaire socialist leaders. Cinema is the only form of nightlife permitted. Anything more is branded as decadent, alien, bourgeois culture. Ironically, tickets are big business on the flourishing black market. Princess Anne went to meet the man behind this unique isolationist regime. General Ne Win has stuck rigidly to his vision of creating a Burmese utopia since he seized power 25 years ago. Though the attempt to improve foreign relations suggests even Ne Win realizes the time has come for change. Economic progress has been pitifully slow. The many masks of Ne Win's mysterious socialism barely hide the facts of Burma's decline. Rising unemployment and inflation, food and fuel shortages, a black market thought to be bigger than the official economy, a people growing poorer by the day. Burma, once the rice bowl of Asia, now holds out the begging bowl, recently applying to the United Nations for the status of least developed country, a sign that Ne Win has at last begun to admit his policies may have failed. The timeless Irrawaddy River is finally being put to good use, its silt-brown flow processed to provide these remote rural people with safe drinking water for the first time in their lives. Princess Anne inspected this £20 million foreign aid scheme designed to bring these Burmese of a bygone age closer to the 20th century, though outwardly things look little different from the days of the British Empire.
By the old mine pagoda, looking eastward to the sea, there's a Burma girl a-setting, and I know she thinks of me. For the wind is in the palm trees, and the temple bells they say, come you back, you British soldier, come you back to Mandalay, come you back to Mandalay.
The soldiers did return, laying down their lives to free Burma from the Japanese.
Mandalay, where the old flotilla lay, and you hear their paddles chanting from Rangoon to Mandalay.
The British colonial presence has long gone from this new socialist Burma, but the memory is not forgotten. At Tauchon Cemetery, Princess Anne paid her respects to the Commonwealth soldiers who died in some of the most bitter combat of World War II. 7 VCs rest here amongst the 6,500 graves in this tranquil garden. The Princess laid a wreath on behalf of the families of those buried here and paused a moment to remember 27,000 more whose names are inscribed in Tauchon Cemetery. Taking the road to Mandalay these days is still like stepping back in time. Foreign influences are only just filtering into Burma's traditional center of Buddhist learning and national culture. Little seems to have changed since Burma's last monarch, King Tibor, handed Mandalay over to the British Indian Empire a century ago.
Burma, I think, is a place that I've heard an awful lot about, obviously. I grew up with the stories, and that's slightly more difficult in a way to fit in. I don't usually go with any preconceived ideas, and maybe I had a slight sort of preconceived idea of what Burma would be like. I think it's an amazingly talented country. I mean, there's terrific ability in Burma, as well as its very obvious potential in sort of minerals and agricultural ability. But the people themselves, I think, have got tremendous talent, which at the moment is just underexploited.
Though perhaps Burma's greatest treasure is its ageless beauty. On the plain of the Irrawaddy River, the legendary pagodas of Pagan, some the size of St. Paul's Cathedral. Once there were 50,000 here, built by a Burmese dynasty that fell 7 centuries ago. Wars, earthquakes and neglect have claimed all but 2,000. As the sun began to sink, Princess Anne climbed Tatpia New Temple, the highest of them all. Perched on a distant terrace in the evening heat haze, she caught on camera one of the most haunting views in the world. Sunset over the birthplace of a civilization that once dominated Southeast Asia.